Production of alcoholic beverages. Alcoholic drinks are produced by any of the two methods. A. Fermentation. B. Distillation. A. Fermentation. All alcoholic beverages are the result of fermentation or the presence of the fermented product. All distilled spirits, wines and malt beverages are produced by different fermentation processes. The differences help to produce uniqueness in each product. Fermentation is a natural process. To achieve desired results, however, the correct yeast, temperature, environment and proper production process are necessary. Fermentation is a process in which yeast changes a sugar, glucose into ethyl alcohol, C2H5OH, and carbon dioxide, CO2, with the help of heat, developed during the process, and the enzyme zymase facilitates chemical change. Other enzymes such as maltose, found in barley, maybe are needed to reduce some starches and sugar to glucose so that yeast can convert it to ethanol. The chemical process is C6 hydrogen oxide 6,2C2H5OH plus 2CO2, glucose, ethanol, carbon dioxide. The triangle shown in the above chemical process indicates heat is formed, and the arrow pointing upward after the CO2 indicates the carbon dioxide which escapes. Some brewers captures and store the carbon dioxide to reincorporate to malt beverages or to champagne to give effervescence effect. Yeast grows in temperatures ranging from 50 F to 115 F. But it does best at human body temperature. Fermentation may take week to month under favorable conditions. Fermenting time depends upon the amount of glucose produced, the temperature and other factors. Yeast multiplies during fermentation process and may increase up to 4 times in good fermenting conditions. Fermentation stops working when the temperature gets too low or too high, when the alcohol content reaches 15% or when there is shortage of glucose to carry out fermentation process. A solution that contains more than 55% sugar is not fermentable. Not all fermentable liquids contain glucose. Yeast contains enzymes that changes carbohydrates to glucose. Example: grapes contain fructose, which is converted to glucose by the enzymes present in the yeast. Yeast also converts complex carbohydrates such as starches into glucose. However, this process is more complex and slow, and sometimes desired results are not produced. So as to avoid this problem, the brewer soaks barley or other grains to get sprouted, so that it can change starch to maltose. Yeast easily acts on maltose, splitting it into 2 glucose molecules. Some grains or other carbohydrate products are finely grounded. This hydrolyzes and gelatinizes the starch and some sugars, making it convenient for the yeast to act on them. The glucose has weight of 180 units, ethyl alcohol weighs 46 units and carbon dioxide weighs 44 units. During fermentation, 1 glucose molecule splits into 2 ethanol molecules and 2 carbon dioxide molecules. Carbon dioxide is a gas, thus, it escapes, leaving only ethanol. So, the mixture gets lighter. That's why every 2% of sugar fermentation yields 1% of ethanol. Thus, the grape must that is 30% sugar can be fermented down to 15% of ethanol. The grape's must is the juice of grapes obtained from pressing before fermentation. It will be a dry wine with little or no sugar left. Yeast. Yeast acts as a catalyst during fermentation. It is a single-celled organism, found in abundant quantity in soil, plants and air. Louis Pasteur proved that fermentation is caused by yeast and it is not a spontaneous action. He also identified many of the substances that fermentation produced. For many years, brewers used wild yeast for fermentation, which is found in abundant quantity and only need food and a favorable environment to reproduce. Wild yeasts are present in vineyards and especially on the skin of grapes. The most common species of wild yeasts are Hansenula, Clochera, Piscia and Torolopsis were used in the manufacturing of wines. However, wild yeast Mycoderma vini is still used in the Jerez area of Spain for fermenting and producing desired flavor of sherry. Brewers developed cultured yeast that would ferment malt brews near the surface. Others developed yeast which fermented beer slowly at the bottom of the fermenting vat. The two beers are quite different. Brewers use various stains of the yeast Saccharomyces cerevisiae to produce desired results. Brewers kills wild yeast in fermenting vat by adding sulfur dioxide, which is lethal to them. Characteristics of various yeasts are: A. Some yeast remains active till 5% of alcoholic strength and some yeasts works up to 15%. B. Some yeast accelerates the process of fermentation and some act slowly. C. Most of the wild yeasts eliminated by the addition of sulfur dioxide and some tolerate sulfur dioxide. D. Yeast also influences the aroma and flavor of the alcoholic drinks. E. Heat is generated during fermentation, and some of the yeast tolerates the high temperature. F. Yeast with flocculate may be used in the production of sparkling wine. Following are the yeasts used for the fermentation of alcoholic products. A. Saccharomyces cerevisiae is a strain of cultured yeast used for the production of beer by top fermentation. It acts on a higher temperature of 15-25 C. B. Saccharomyces carlsbergensis works at a lower temperature, 5-9 C, and is used in the production of bottom fermented beer. C. Saccharomyces ellipsodium, used in the manufacturing of wine and is more resistant to sulfur dioxide. Congeners. During fermentation process, 5% of the sugar may be converted into substances other than ethyl alcohol, such as acids, glycerin, phenolics, butyl alcohol, propyl alcohol and fossil oil. These fermentation products are often called congeners. Glycerin is a congener that makes the wine smooth, and butyl and amyl and other such components enhances the fruity aroma of wines. Esters formed during fermentation are highly aromatic and are important constituents of perfumes along with fragrant aldehydes. Distilled spirits and malt brews develop less congener than wines during fermentation. Fermentation of distilled spirits. The spirits are distilled from liquid called wort and are produced from a cooked mash made from carbohydrates which have been converted into sugar such as glucose, maltose or dextrin. Cultured yeast is added in the wort and the fermentation takes place at a temperature of 70 F to 80 F for the duration of 2–4 days. The resulting wort is usually having alcoholic content ranges between 6–10%. Fermentation of malt beverages. Top and bottom fermentation is used for the production of malt beverages. Saccharomyces cerevisiae is used for the top fermentation and it is fast and acts on a higher temperature for a period of 7 days. The resulting brew has a slight yeast flavor and is not smooth as other brews. Ale, stout and porter are top fermented beers. Bottom fermented brews work on a low temperature for a longer period of time and produces smoother and softer brew than top fermented brews. Bottom fermented brews are called lagers. Fermentation of wine. Yeast grows rapidly in a wine must. Red wines are quickly fermented. It usually takes 5 to 7 days to completely ferment all the sugar, producing a dry wine. The temperature is kept between 70 F to 90 F. These temperatures foster the development of desirable congeners, which helps to enhance the quality of wine. Fermentation also produces undesirable components such as fossil oil, excess acids and tannins. Thermovinification helps to reduce such substances in red wines. White wines are fermented more slowly and at a lower temperature than red wines. The temperature is kept at 35 F and fermentation lasts for 10–14 days. Sweet wine is produced by stopping fermentation before the yeast converts all the sugar and alcohol. Stops fermentation at about 14%. The wine is then passed through filters to remove yeast, bacteria other than microorganisms.